Well, hello, hello, hello. You are listening to the No Brainers Empowering Possibilities Show. This is dialogues of encouragement with fresh perspective, invitations to ahas, a little bit of science, a dash of behavioral psychology, and a whole lot of creative fun. So if leveling up is on your radar, my friend, you are at the right show. I'm your host, Roseanne Marsh. I'm the author of the teen and the parent empowerment curriculum called Level Up. And you are listening to episode number 12, Commandment 1.5, Kindfulness. So what in the world is kindfulness? I mean, I've heard of mindfulness, but are they connected? Mindfulness is where you are staying present in the world, where you are aware of your feelings and your thoughts, and you don't bring an air of judgment. It's how you stay present with the things you're doing and enjoy where you're at. But what in the world does it mean to have kindfulness? Well, 6 years ago, mindfulness took on a new look and a new depth of meaning with a new book called Kindfulness, when that came out by Ajahn Brahm, and he's a British Theravada Buddhist monk. Kindfulness is when you add kind to mindfulness. So in today's episode, we're going to explore three things. Number one, what is kindfulness and why does that need to be on your radar? Number two, how do you practice it? Number three, what are the benefits that you're going to gain by adopting this new practice? Well, Brahm writes that while mindfulness merely observes, kindfulness actively practices compassion. In other words, it's one thing to be aware, and it's another to be aware with the intention of being kind, compassionate, and constructive. And I'm all for being kind. And in a world of confusion and separation, there's a larger need now for everyone to have a little more connection, more touch, more positive influence, even if it's just by seeing a smile or connecting with the text or hearing a voice that encourages, that lets someone know that you see them, truly see them. And when someone demonstrates something large or small, this is a touch of kindfulness. So when I first saw the kindfulness, I was drawn to this new facelift on mindfulness. A couple of years ago, I was asked to speak to an event for women, and the subject that came to me in my time of contemplation was facing our fear. And today's episode is not about fear, but I had prepared a message, and as I was thinking of what is it that we need to have strength when we're faced with a time of fear or trepidation, and it came to me that the largest tool, the biggest asset, would be a relationship with God, the universe, or your higher power. And now I may be coming at this from a Christian perspective, but you apply this to whatever belief structure you have. But when I thought of this, that we needed a relationship to be able to make it through fear, this scripture came to mind. It's Matthew 22, 37 through 38. And it's when Christ was being asked, what is the greatest commandment? Jesus declared, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. Now, have you ever tried to comprehend that word love? I know we can think about someone that we've truly been in love with or have love for. I mean, we can talk about caring for someone, wanting to spend some time with someone, having their best interest in mind. And honestly, love isn't just reserved for the human-human interaction. I can truly say that I love our horse. And there's this connection that is truly out of this world. And I'm not talking about the love that's like the fan crushing on a celebrity or like, oh, I just love them. I'm talking about that amazing feeling when you think your heart is going to explode. So think of this. God is saying, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with your soul and your mind. And he's going to love you back in the same way. Now that doesn't sound like servitude, does it? Doesn't sound like you are inferior. I am God. So just bow down to me. No, he's saying, love me because I have your best interest at heart. And if we can build this relationship, then you can't even believe the amazing things that I can do for you. Don't believe me? Well, let's use the Bible's definition of what love is. And as I read this, think of what that would look and feel like if you had this kind of reciprocal love with the Lord. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices in truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, and always perseveres. So the greatest commandment is to have a relationship of love with the Lord, like I just read what the definition is. But there's also a second commandment, right? And the second is likened to the first. Love your neighbor as yourself. So love your neighbor. There are no commandments greater than these, it says. And when you look up the definition of neighbor in the Bible, it's inclusive of those that are not in your social circle, or maybe even those have been kicked out of your social circle. And we are to make space for them to come back in. But I want to dissect these scriptures even more, because it felt to me when I was creating that presentation for those ladies that there was a commandment missing. Maybe he's like, what? A commandment missing? And I'm not trying to rewrite the scripture. Well, maybe I am. Maybe I am trying to use the scriptures as per Roseanne Marsh. But there's something, a part of that is just not getting enough stage time that it needs to have. So let's read again. And the second is likened to the first. Love your neighbor as yourself. Wait. I'm to love my neighbor as myself. All right, I'm rewriting these scriptures because we as women know that one of the hardest things for us is to love ourselves. Maybe you don't struggle with that, but for the majority of women, we may feel less than, unworthy, we don't measure up, we're underappreciated, we're overlooked, not confident, and we're super critical of ourselves. So this is what came to me when I was writing that message years ago. There's another commandment. It's Commandment 1.5. And it says, love yourself. Commandment 1 is love the God. Commandment 2 is love your neighbor with all your heart, mind, your soul, and your mind. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say the scriptures, according to Roseanne Marsh, our Commandment 1.5 is wedged right between the first and the second. Love yourself with all your heart and your soul and your mind. And this is where it gets good, because kindfulness is all about being kind to yourself. So Commandment 1.5 is kindfulness. So I said, let's talk about kindfulness. Why is that something that needs to be on our radar? Well, this commandment, like we said, and here's the psychology behind that. For us to love our neighbor, we've got to come from a place of love from ourselves. And loving yourself can be one of the hardest yet most important things you'll ever do. And what does it mean to love yourself? And how do you actually love yourself? For various reasons, many of us find it easier to love others than to love ourselves. Sometimes we're truly quite awful to ourselves. We subject ourselves to harsh inner critic, unhealthy relationships, toxic food and substances, and we dwell on our perceived inadequacies. But regardless of the reasons for our lack of self-love, it's time to start caring for ourselves and treating ourselves with the same love that we would give other people. Loving yourself isn't selfish. Not only does it improve your relationship with yourself, but listen to this. It shows others how to love you. James Carr is a noted psychologist, and I love what he said. He said, I feel better about you when I feel better about me. So let's dissect that for a second. I can serve you better when I can serve myself. I can love you better when I can love myself. I can be patient with you better when I'm more patient with myself. You may be saying, well, or I can nurture you better when I nurture myself. You would say, I'm a good nurturer, but I still put myself last. But can you imagine if you were nurturing yourself, the capacity of nurturing that you would have? Not only that, but the physical and the mental capability that you would have if we took care of ourselves and loved ourselves in the same way that we nurture and care for others. So the second thing I want to talk about is how you practice kindfulness. And I want to take us back to an amazing research that was done by Christine Neff. 12 years ago, she started working on being kind to ourselves and did some research in the space of self-esteem and self-compassion. And it's interesting because we think of self-esteem as being incredibly healthy, and self-esteem is good. We want to have self-worth and be able to evaluate ourselves as a good person or a bad person. But psychologists were using this as like the ultimate marker of mental health. If you've got self-esteem, then you've arrived. They said self-esteem is not a problem, but it's how we're getting our self-esteem that is. Because it's how you get there is by feeling special or above average. And it's almost an insult if we feel like we're average. And it's all about, if I feel average, then I've got to find ways to puff myself up or put others down or be competitive. And what was happening, it was creating an epidemic of narcissism. So even think about kids who bully. The reason they bully is so that they can build up their own self-esteem. Why are we prejudicial? It's because we think we have a better religion or a better race or a better political agenda. So women especially, we're really hard on ourselves, our perception of how we look. They had a study that was done. It was really intriguing. And they studied kids from third grade all the way up through high school. And third grade boys and girls asked them, well, how do you feel about your body? How do you feel in your skin? What do you think? And they're like, oh, we feel really great self-image. Then they went to fifth grade and the boys were like, oh, I feel great. Seventh grade, awesome. Ninth grade, yep, rocking it. All the way through their senior year, the guys were like, I'm comfortable. I'm comfortable with who I am and how I look. But when I go back to the girls from third grade on, it like disintegrated. It took a nosedive. And all the way up through high school, there was a struggle to feel good in their skin, to feel good about the way they looked. So how do we get off this treadmill? We do so by self-compassion. And self-compassion is not a way of judging yourself. It's a way of relating to ourselves kindly and embracing ourselves, flaws and all. So the first way to practice kindfulness is to have self-compassion. So let's try something. We're going to do like a little mini thought meditation. And if you're somebody who likes to write things down, you can write things down. Or if not, I invite you to just close your eyes. And I want you to think through these questions that I'm going to ask you. Okay, think of some instances in the past when you've had a good friend come to you that's struggling in some way. Maybe they felt bad about themselves, or they made a big mistake at work, they got rejected in a relationship, or they're struggling with like a health issue. They're having a difficult time. Now they're seated right next to you and they're pouring out their heart. Now I want you to just go over in your mind, what are the types of things that you're saying to this friend that's struggling? What are the natural responses that you have? What do you say? And not only what do you say, but what's the tone of voice that you're using? What is your body posture like when you're with your friend? Do you give your friend a hug? Do you soften? So just get in touch with how it feels to be you when you're with a close friend who's struggling. Get into that visual of what it looks like, what it feels like, and sense how you are with a struggling friend. Okay, now I want you to try something different. Now I want you to think about some time when you've been struggling, perhaps recently in life. Maybe it's a relationship that's difficult, an issue you're feeling bad about. If not feeling bad, maybe it's a health issue or regret. Think about a time when you struggle, and how do you typically treat yourself when you struggle? What are the types of things you say to yourself when you struggle? What's that internal dialogue that you have going on? What's your tone of voice? Is it warm? Is it harsh? Is it cold? Is it angry? And also, what is your body posture like when you're with yourself? Do you tense up or are you relaxed? So just really try to get in touch with how it feels in your body and how you relate to yourself when you struggle. On this last part. And finally, I invite you to think if you can see any patterns of difference between how you relate to yourself versus how you relate to a friend that's struggling. Patterns of difference could be the types of language you use, the tone of voice, but it also could be, is it a voice that catastrophizes, or another voice says, oh, it's not such a big deal? Or do you have a voice that says, oh man, this is going to be permanent? Or another voice that says, this will pass. Okay, so open your eyes if your eyes were closed. Was there an aha that you had with this exercise? I wish I could hear your responses, but typically when people do this exercise, they find that they really are much harsher with themselves than with others. In fact, research done by Christine Neff showed that 75 to 80% say that they're kinder to others than themselves. The norm is to treat others with more warmth and more support and not make them feel like they made a mistake, but bring out their good qualities. So we should treat ourselves in the same way. So here's 2 questions for you to answer. What would be the impact on your good friend if you talk to them the same way you talk to yourself? And if I had a friend going through the exact same thing that I'm going through right now, what would I say and how would I say it? Because those words and the ways that we act towards others can really be a template for us to try on ourselves. So try treating ourselves the same way. I love also thinking, how would you talk to a 5-year-old? How would you speak to them? Well, think of yourself as a 5-year-old. You would not berate or yell or tell them yourself, that 5-year-old, that you're stupid, that they'll never achieve anything. These are tender souls. We can seriously wound a child by our words and our tones. Well, that 5-year-old is in all of us. We're going to get more out of a child if we motivate and encourage, and more out of ourselves when we show self-compassion. So to bring the mindfulness into self-compassion, we need to be aware that what we are feeling and going through is tough. We have to just look at it as what it is. It's tough, it's hard, it's embarrassing, it's whatever. Practice this with something that is hard. This is part of being a human being, right? We're not alone in suffering. We're having human experiences, and things are going to happen, and we're going to need self-compassion. Maybe even put a hand over our heart as kind of a physical gesture, or wrap ourselves in our hands and let our body feel the warmth of it. There's something about having that physical touch, and we can give it to ourselves, the same support that you would give to a friend. So I love the studies of Christine Neff and how self-compassion fits into kindfulness. But there's one other piece that I want to bring up, and it's another piece of living kindfulness. I want to add this as a piece because it's one that we teach in Level Up Empowering Possibilities. There's a deadly virus that's been going around for a long time, and it infects our life the more we're exposed to other people. So unless you're a hermit living in the hills somewhere, you can easily be exposed to this virus. It starts with a C. It is not the pandemic that may have sprung into your mind. It's a different pandemic. It's called compare-itis. It affects those that look at what others have or do and then make a comparison to their own life. So compare-itis becomes destructive when what we view or think we view makes us feel less than or inadequate in comparison to others. In a society where it's all about filters and glamour, and this is how I'm living, breathing, dressing, and buying, It's hard to think our lives measure up until we take a step back and realize that there really is a facade here. How do we know what we're comparing ourselves against is even truthful? The world is so intriguing, and these standards are being set out there of what we should be attaining, and who are they that set the standard? So let me explain. When our external vision of what and who others are affects us, compare-itis starts a chain reaction of feelings of inadequacy, not measuring up, not feeling privileged, angry at our situation, and pretty much dissatisfied with our life. There's only one you, and I repeat, only one person with whom we can compare. Okay, place your hand over your heart. Come on, do it. The person's heart you are touching is the only one that you compare yourself to. The only person you should compete with is yourself. The only one that you can better their last attempt is you. The only one whose results should be on your radar is you. You have no control over anyone else, but you have complete control over you. Empowerment comes when our lens of comparison shifts from outside of us to inside of us. Oh, wait, you may say, isn't life all about competing against others? Don't I compete to get a job, to win a race or a game in sports? Don't I compete to get a date with maybe somebody I want? Isn't business all about doing better than somebody else so we can have a larger share of consumers? Well, there is truth in these statements, but let this soak in a minute. We can look around and see how we compare. We can get good ideas and learn ways to improve. And here's the key piece to this. If my whole goal is just to be better than someone else, there's that energy of one-upsmanship, an energy of wanting them to be less than me. If instead I am grateful for ideas and ways to improve, and I turn inward, I see what applies to me. And when I focus on my behavior, on my performance, on my relationships, on my thoughts, on my actions, my desires, and I bring them into alignment with my dreams, I'm on a course to change me. And the ripple effect around me can be astounding. We compete many times also with others who've been on the journey a lot longer than we have. A man was jogging along an urban road when he saw ahead of him someone who was close to his age, and he's like, hey, I can catch up and I can beat this guy. I just know I can. And as he shortened the distance between them, he smiled as he passed the other runner, and the runner nodded and stayed at his pace. And as the first man upped his gait, he thought to himself, I sure am schooling this guy. And he went another 3 minutes, and then he looked back to see where this guy was, only to see that he turned off and he was at the end of his training period. He was winding down. And sometimes we compete with all of those, sometimes we compete with others that have been practicing longer, have had more experience, have put in more time. But when we base our success on how we compare with someone else, we will always be chasing the next comparison. When we strive, however, to better our own best, that is when healthy progress is happening. Can we use competition as a source of motivation? Absolutely. But when we can be truly happy for the success of others, even when they beat our best, that is when inner peace and happiness can reside. As you compare where you were and strive to better your own results, the celebration feeds your inner self-concept. And as we improve upon our own performance, we celebrate. We should be celebrating. Celebrate even tiny little steps. Celebrate the small steps. And when it's overwhelming, have self-compassion. And as if you are your own best friend, turn to yourself in self-compassion. Love yourself. Encourage yourself. Forgive yourself. See what you've learned and be in awe of that. Use kindfulness instead of competition to drive our lives. So I'd be remiss if I didn't nod back to the first commandment. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and your soul and with all your mind. This can be your lifeline. We aren't alone in the comparison, the heartache, the striving. Yes, we do need to be our own biggest fan, but our higher power is there to comfort and cheer and motivate and delight in us and have no judgment for where we are. For some of you, we say, my relationship with God is not that relationship. And I know that our earthly relationships can sometimes skew how we will relate to God, or prayers that seem to go unanswered could cause us to distance ourselves from a God that we thought wasn't listening. But may I invite you to ponder again upon that relationship? Because if we will again just open the doors of possibilities and ask and seek, I can say that support will be there beyond your wildest dreams. And that support can be ours. We don't have to do life on our own. There's a source of light, of knowledge, of peace, of comfort, of assistance, of enlightenment, of knowing that can fill our cup to that point where that when we are loving our neighbor, we are loving them from an overflow, from an abundance, from richness. And I'm not talking about monetary or materialistic things. But don't take my word for it. Just soften your heart and ask. You can see I get a little emotional about that, but it is such a lifeline. The third thing I said I wanted to talk about was, what do you gain from kindfulness? And there's 5 things here I want to bring out. Kindfulness makes us happier. The very first benefit we will feel when we do kindness for ourselves is a happiness. It's a boost in our mental health. Service is such a win-win proposition because not only do we help someone, but we get this feel good because the dopamine that drops into our brain. There's even a term for that feeling. It's called helper's high. And that beats an energy drink anytime. The second is kindfulness is good for the heart. Did you know that performing acts of kindness for ourselves and others produces an emotional warmth? And that emotional warmth produces another hormone, oxytocin, in the brain, and it floods through the body. And it is a cardiovascular protecting hormone because it lowers our blood pressure. So the more acts of kindness we perform out there, the more of this heart protective hormone that we have in our body. So isn't it interesting that when we I use kindness to go out there and do for others, it gets a hormone in our body that actually protects our heart. I think that's fascinating. The third is kindness slows down aging. That same oxytocin reduces levels of free radicals and inflammation in the cardiovascular system. And it not only protects it, but it slows down the aging on a cellular level. I'm interested. There have also been suggestions in the scientific journals of a strong link between compassion and the activity of the vagus nerve, which regulates the heart rate, also controls inflammation levels. So can you imagine marketing an anti-aging cream as a jar of kindness? So this is kind of exciting. Look at all these benefits. The fourth benefit is kindness improves relationship. I mean, this goes without saying because we all love it when someone's kind to us. But being kind, we are breaking down the barriers between us and creating a bond between us. We really are wired for kindness. Have you ever noticed that there's those people that someone's struggling with luggage, they're the first one to go help, or a mother has all these kids in the grocery store and there are people that flock to help. And if you think, oh, I don't know if kindness is in my genetics, we have no excuses because we can change that. We can establish a habit and a reflex of kindness. So the fifth benefit there is kindness is contagious. When we're kind, we inspire other people to be kind. And when we show kindness, it's like this ripple effect, and it'll even go out to our friends. It'll ripple out 3 layers. You ever been in like a fast food drive-in only to hear that the car behind or in front of you just paid for your meal? And you're like, how can you help but not pay for the food of the person behind you? So when a pebble is dropped in a still pond, it creates these waves that ripple out, and kindness reacts in the same manner. And it affects the lives of others, inspiring us to pay it forward. There was a study that was reported in the New England Journal. It talks about a 28-year-old person who walked into a clinic and he donated a kidney. And this set off a pay it forward type ripple effect when the spouses and the other family members of these recipients of the kidney donated one of theirs to someone else with need. And they had the domino effect they were able to track. And it ended up that 10 people received a new kidney just as a consequence of that anonymous donor. Take a deep breath. Breathe this in, because kindfulness is about filling our well so that we are giving and loving and receiving from a full cup. Love the Lord thy God, love thy neighbor, and love thyself. What does loving you look like? What have you heard today that you might want to adopt? Kindfulness starts with loving and accepting and nurturing ourselves. Kindfulness. Commandment 1.5. So if you're listening to the recording of this program, you may also enjoy catching us live so that you can be part of the second half when we do community shares offline. That happens every Friday. We start at 2 p.m. Pacific time. We'd love to have you a part of the after show discussions. So if you like what you've learned here, you can go to nobrainers.com/learn more. You may enjoy our teen and adult empowerment course called Level Up, Empowering Possibilities. Thank you for joining me this week. And I hope this week you'll find kindfulness for yourself. Commandment 1.5. Thanks for joining.